This is the Can't Wait podcast, our Jets pod here at The Athletic. Tim McMaster along with Connor Hughes, and you should subscribe and rate and review us if you can, wherever you're listening to your podcast. You could save 40% off on a subscription to The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait. This is our overall draft recap. Connor, we checked in on Friday after the first round, and we went all in on Mekhi Becton and what that meant for this team. So we're not going to focus too much on Becton, but more the rest of the draft. And we also want to hear from everybody out there that's tuning in on YouTube. Get your questions into the chat. Marissa will get them over to us, and we will get in on those as well. Adam Gase spoke today. I want your thoughts on that as well. So let's start there, since that's the newest thing. Anything big come out of Gase's talk to the media today, or was it the normal stuff?
No, normal stuff. I mean, it was pretty much coach speak, exactly what you would expect. I mean, we talked to Adam Gase during the draft, right? So after each one of the days, day 1, day 2, day 3, Gase was on that phone call with Joe Douglas. So while we were primarily talking to Douglas, obviously he's the one who's pulling the strings on this draft, and he's the one who's making these picks. So he's the guy that obviously, kind of his words ring a little bit heavier than what Adam Gase's would. He was there, so we were still able to talk to him about how Denzel Mims is going to fit in. Does he think Denzel Mims is going to have a week 1 impact? What he thinks of Perrine? Like all these other guys, like we were able to discuss with him a lot of those things. And so this was just kind of like, okay, 2 days later, let's talk to Adam Gase again. And we talked about the virtual offseason program. He said he kind of likes it a little bit because, they basically have like 4 hours of meetings, and he can bounce in and out of those meetings. So he can go from, one to, okay, leaves that one, goes into another. It kind of allows him to be, 5 places at once, as opposed to just being in one meeting room and then having to go down a hall to go talk to the other guys. So I think he does like that aspect of it. And then the other thing that he just kind of talked about was like the basic things as far as, I'm completely losing my train of thought, but he kind of talked about all the basic things in terms of like Sam Darnold. He thinks Sam Darnold's going to take another step in the right direction this year. Obviously, he likes the playmakers that he has within this offense and within this offensive philosophy, both within adding Perriman, adding Mims. And then one thing he mentions was getting also Chris Herndon back, which is something that we've talked about a pretty decent amount as well. So there was not too much news, I think, coming out of it. The Jamal Adams thing he briefly touched upon, but he didn't really go too into detail on that. Again, he stressed what you would think he would. It's voluntary. He doesn't have to be here, and there's really nothing the Jets can do to make him be here. So whatever Jamal wants to do, Jamal can do. And other than that, it really wasn't too eventful of a conference call. Nothing like the one he had after the Bills opener last year, where he went a little bit off the rails.
It's amazing, though, what a difference a year makes, right? As far as the relationship between head coach and GM, and what you saw this week as opposed to last year.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you that, man. I mean, I think that was pretty obvious with this whole thing. I mean, obviously, look, Joe Douglas is the guy that Adam Gase wanted as general manager, and obviously he's the guy that Christopher Johnson wanted as general manager. As Christopher went out and paid an awful lot of money to make that marriage possible, as far as bringing Joe Douglas to the Jets, because Joe was a guy that was in a very interesting position in Philadelphia. He had a lot of say within that organization. I know he didn't have final say. I know he wasn't the general manager, but he ran the draft, and the draft was his baby. So when he was there in Philly, it needed to be the perfect situation for him to leave. And I think a year before he joined the Jets, the Texans were really interested in Joe Douglas, and the Texans really wanted to go bring Joe Douglas aboard, but the Texans were not going to give him final say as a general manager. So basically would have been a lateral position for him, going from Philadelphia Eagles VP to the GM of the Texans. Yeah, technically maybe he would have gotten a little more money, but it's Bill O'Brien's show. Bill O'Brien has the final say. So he said, I'm staying in Philly, and we're going to be happy in Philly. And then when the Jets came around, it was the same thing. He was like, yeah, kind of like it. And he was like, but I'm still kind of happy. And then Christopher Johnson was like, well, what if I write you this check? And he was like, it helps me a little bit, but I'm still kind of Christopher. I was like, well, what if I write you this check? And eventually it got to the point where you just couldn't turn down. I think he's getting I know it's a 6-year deal. I forget the exact amount of money he's getting each year, but it's absurd money for a general manager, where he just could not walk away from that money. But still, I mean, the relationship between Joe Douglas and Adam Gase is there. I mean, it's there when it wasn't with Joe Douglas and Mike Maccagnan. And it wasn't necessarily that those two guys hated each other. It just, they were very different people, Maccagnan and Gase. I mean, Gase is a guy that wants it done yesterday. There is no dancing around. There's no foreplay. It's just get it done. And like, that's what Mike Maccagnan was not. That Mike Maccagnan was the guy that took his time. It was waiting. I mean, they had Rashard Robinson, the corner that they had traded for, on the roster for like 3 extra months from what they should have, because Maccagnan thought there was a chance they might be able to get a draft pick for him toward like the end of training camp. And it was basically the point where like Gase had to go and be like, dude, the entire team hates Rashard Robinson. He's a terrible football player. No one's going to give us jack you know what for him. Just cut him, get rid of him. And Mike was like, oh, you know what? I still kind of think maybe we can get something. Maybe we can get a conditional 7. And Gase was like, we don't care. Just get rid of the damn guy. And so like it was little things like that that just eventually added up, and it wasn't a working relationship. It was not a conducive. It wasn't a relationship that was healthy enough to sustain continued success in a franchise. And that's why they went differently. And I think maybe that's also probably why Adam Gase didn't talk to us next to Mike Maccagnan at the NFL draft last year, but suddenly now he's on the conference calls here with Joe Douglas. So this is definitely a healthier relationship. You can tell it's guys that see things eye to eye. But I think more than anything else, and I think that this was probably what was definitively not the case last year, is that Adam Gase trusts Joe Douglas. He trusts what Joe Douglas's evaluation says. He trusts the players that Joe Douglas is going to add, and he believes that Joe Douglas is going to build a team that Adam Gase can win with. And I don't know if that was the case last year.
So overall, 10 new players for the Jets, if you count Quincy Wilson, the player that they traded the 211th pick for. So now they have they're kind of taking all the secondary from the Colts last year. But overall, 10 new players. So let's go through just kind of best pick, worst pick in your mind, question marks. Becton was kind of the solid pick in number 1, but it seems like a consensus, which you don't always get on a draft, that the best pick for the Jets was Denzel Mims. And I would say, Connor, it's not necessarily that they picked him, but the fact that they were able to pick him when they picked him and gain a pick by trading back and still getting him, that was kind of the gem for Douglas in this draft.
Yeah, I think it was impressive general managing, if that's a verb. I don't know, but it's going to be one now. I mean, I think that's yeah, right. I think that's what that was, because I tweeted it, man. I mean, like when the Jets were sitting there at 48 originally, I was like, oh, Mims is the pick. Like, you got the protection. Now you need the playmakers. You need to get Sam Darnold his weapons. And I saw that pick and was like, oh, this is obviously going to be Mims, unless maybe they go with another kind of receiver, but it's going to definitely be a receiver. When Douglas traded back, I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? And I literally sent out a tweet that said, I don't think Denzel Mims is going to be there in 11 picks. And sure enough, 11 picks from there, guess who's waiting there for the Jets? Denzel Mims. So by Douglas being able to move back, I think that it was important for him to get those extra draft picks, which then he flipped for even more draft picks on day 4 when he dealt with the Patriots there and got 120 and 125, I think it was. I think that was smart. I think it was good general managing, but and Mims, I think, is a player that certainly fills a need, right? He's a height, weight, speed guy. He's somebody that both Rex Hogan, the Jets assistant general manager, and Joe Douglas, the Jets GM, obviously said they fell in love with at the Senior Bowl. He was a guy that showed the ability to track the ball deep down the field, separate from defenders with his speed. When you look at him and you watch him play, you don't realize he's playing as fast as he is what they said. And the quote that Rex Hogan dropped that I thought was really, really impressive is that he has the ability to play above the rim. So basically what that means is that wherever the ball is thrown, Mims can go and get it. And the Jets haven't had a player that can do that except for maybe 2015 with Brandon Marshall. And Brandon Marshall was on the back 9 of his career. And then before that, you probably have to go to Braylon Edwards, whom the Jets traded for from the Cleveland Browns. Those are kind of the last 2 guys the Jets had that ability to play above the rim. And Gase said with Mims too, he's a guy that has the ability to keep getting better. That the guy that what they loved most is that he's going to come in and contribute right away. He's going to come in and play right away. It would not surprise me if he's the outside corner opposite Rashad Perryman when week 1 kicks off. But what Gase said is that the player that they get now is not the player that they're going to have by the end of the year. It's not the player they're going to have next year. And it's not the player they're going to have in 3 years. That he has so much potential that when they can clean up his route running, that when they can kind of improve his concentration a little bit to shore up his hands, this is a guy that has wide receiver 1 potential. And to not only get him in the second round, but get him when trading back and recouping some extra draft picks, it's an impressive thing there for Joe Douglas to be able to do. But honestly, I think the pick for me that was one of the best, or certainly one of the most intriguing, I thought the Jets, they're them getting Bryce Hall when they did in the 5th round, the corner out of Virginia, a guy who some people believe had 2nd and 3rd round potential. I think he was a pretty impressive signing. And then the other one is, and I'm probably butchering his last name, and when I see him in person, if I ever see him in person because of Corona, I got to ask him how to say is Jabari Zuniga. I can't even say it. The defensive end out of Florida. I'm just going to call him Jabari because I know I can pronounce his first name. He's a guy that I am very, very intrigued with. And I know the production at Florida in terms of 13, 14, 15 sacks, 30 tackles for loss. I know that wasn't necessarily there. I don't think that drafting him was the best pick for the Jets. I think that with this, I kind of go by value. And for that, I go with Bryce Hall, but he's kind of one of the players that I'm him along with Ashton Davis. We'll talk about in a little bit. He's somebody that I'm very intrigued with because of his versatility. And I know he's super athletic and he was able, the Jets like that. They like his speed. They like his strength, all that stuff. They believe that his pass rush disruption rate, which is what Joe Douglas coined. And apparently that's a statistic that is out there, which you don't see that on ESPN.com. So the pass rush disruption rate for Jabari was through the roof and somebody that they like. But what he kind of reminded me of, and I know NFL.com compared him to Robert Quinn, the pass rusher for the Rams and the Dolphins and the Cowboys now. But what the player that I kind of reading about Jabari, that he kind of reminded me more of that Brandon Graham, and he's kind of that same size, Justin Tuck, that kind of same thing where, yeah, he's a defensive end, outside linebacker, can rush from the outside, but where he will have a ton of value and he will make a ton of a difference is when you can take him in passing situations and you can slide him inside and you suddenly have a guy that is strong, fast, quick, and agile, and you have him rushing a guard who is not used to dealing with strong, fast, and agile unless he's going up against Aaron Donald every day. So I think Jabari has the chance to be one of the picks that we come back here and say, you know what, I didn't think much of it at the time, but that guy's a difference maker, and it's because of his versatility. When you look at guys aside from Brandon Graham, who was a first-round pick, Tuck was one of those guys that I think was like 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round. Those are the guys that kind of fall because they don't necessarily have the crazy college production, but you can find places to manufacture pressure with him on a defense. And I think that's what the Jets are going to be able to do here with him. And I'll be interested to see how he develops. So I think that Mims obviously is the guy a ton of people are going to talk about. I think it was great work by Joe Douglas to trade back, get extra picks, and still get the guy that they coveted. But Jabari, I think, was somebody that was I'm very intrigued watching. Bryce Hall is a ton of value. And then Ashton Davis is somebody that I'm very intrigued to see on the football field.
Yeah, and Ashton Davis is the next guy I was going to bring up, actually, because when you think about what he can do, obviously the versatility jumps out. And you wrote about the fact that this guy's played all over the field, corner, nickelback, safety, both safeties, linebacker. I guess the question is, does he fit? Was he the right pick at that time for the Jets, considering their needs?
Yeah.
And then the other guy where you think about that and needs and taking a guy is James Morgan, the quarterback out of Florida International that they took in the 4th round. Do you really want to burn a pick on a backup quarterback at that point in the draft? So those are the two, I guess, question marks we can rank those as. Just weigh in on those picks.
Yeah. So again, the James Morgan pick and the Ashton Davis pick are the two that if I was grading this, I would give them probably the lowest grades. With that said, the Ashton Davis as a play, and the reason I say is I give Ashton Davis the pick as one of my lowest graded picks. And I know grading a draft class right away is one of the dumbest things in the world because you just can't, you have no idea. I have no idea what these guys, look, the general manager has no idea what the hell this guy's going to develop into. I sure as hell don't know, but you wait 3 years and then we figure it out. We're always like, oh, look, he was a genius or he's done and he's fired. But I think that I wouldn't have gone with a safety at the Ashton Davis pick. I would have gone with another receiver. I would have gone with a cornerback. I would have gone with another offensive lineman. That's how I would have drafted that position because I just think that those needs were so much higher. And I think that there were players available there, at least if you, depending on who you trust with draft boards and stuff, that those guys would have filled some more pressing needs than Ashton Davis, in my personal opinion. With that said, I am wildly fascinated to see how the Jets are going to use this kid on defense. I mean, Greg Williams is known as somebody who's this defensive mastermind. He has the ability to manufacture pressure, organized chaos. Like he's just confusing people. And he flirted and dabbled a little bit. Dabbled, by the way, is like one of my new favorite words. I'm just going to try to continue to use that. I don't know why. I just love this.
Dabbled in general managing.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So he dabbled with some three safety. I'm going to say it how many times I can say it. He dabbled with some 3 safety packages here last year when the Jets had Marcus May, Jamal Adams, and Rontez Miles. Well, Rontez Miles is a high effort, high energy player. Coaches love him, but he's not that good of a defender. I mean, he can't cover. And aside from packing a punch, I mean, and even then he finds himself out of position sometimes. It's probably why he's unsigned right now. Ashton Davis brings the Jets that same physicality with ridiculously more athleticism. And he's fast. He's quick. He said, versatile. I mean, that's what the Jets want, right? This guy has played cornerback. He's played nickelback, free safety, strong safety, weak side linebacker, was a gunner on special teams and return kicks. So I'm just fascinated to see how Greg Williams gets this piece and how he uses him on defense with Jamal Adams, with Marcus May. Because when I first saw safety, and I didn't know much about Ashton Davis, when I first saw safety, I was like, is a Jamal Adams trade coming or what's going on here? When I started reading about the guy is when I realized, no, the Jets didn't draft this dude to replace Jamal. The Jets didn't draft this dude to replace Marcus. They drafted him so that Greg Williams can get another piece and say, all right, let's F with some quarterbacks' heads and see what we can't do with like these 3 guys on the field all at the same time. And the James Morgan one, here's the thing. I completely agree. When you have an established quarterback like Sam Darnold is, or like the Jets believe Sam Darnold is, I completely agree with drafting a quarterback in the 3rd or 4th round and developing him because what you get in the best case scenario is a solidified good backup quarterback for 3 years that you can then flip for a 1st or 2nd round pick when that guy's contract is coming in towards the end. What I don't agree with is the concept of drafting James to be the backup this year, because look, Joe Douglas is a guy who is no one understands the value of a backup quarterback like Joe Douglas. He won a Super Bowl in 2000 with Trent Dilfer. He won a Super Bowl in 2017 with Nick Foles. Those were backup guys that Trent Dilfer stepped in for because of inefficiency. Nick Foles stepped in, not for inefficiency, but because of an injury to Carson Wentz in his knee. But those 2 guys then led their teams to a championship, right? Trent Dilfer was a veteran. Nick Foles was a veteran. They were guys with experience. They were guys that had been there, done that a little bit. I just don't trust going into next season when you have a quarterback that does have some durability concerns, which you do have with Sam Darnold. Foot injury as a rookie, thumb injury last year that required surgery. I just don't personally believe in going into next year with David Fales and James Morgan as your lone 2 backups behind Sam Darnold, because while James Morgan can develop into a hell of a player, he's not going to be a guy that you are confident in winning games and leading you on a potential playoff run in 2020. You're just not, that's not something that you're going to be confident in. So I would have personally, look, I have no problem drafting James Morgan if you had spent $5-6 million on a veteran quarterback already. If you had gone out there and signed somebody like Brian Hoyer, right? And you have Brian Hoyer as your backup behind Sam Darnold, someone who's had some success, done some things well in this league before, and then you draft James, and then you have James for a year as the 3rd string guy before taking over as your backup in 2021. To go into next season with Fales and James as your 1-2 guys behind Darnold, I think you're flirting with danger, and it's not something that I would have done. So that pick, because there's no veteran already on the roster, is why I question that one. And Ashton, I love the player in Ashton Davis. I just personally would have gone with another position at that spot.
As far as ranking drafts go, Dane Brugler ranked all 32 teams on The Athletic. Check that out. The Jets come in 10th, so top 3rd of the league. So pretty solid first draft for Joe Douglas. And of course, we'll wait and see over the next couple of years if that really plays out to be the truth. All right, I want to get to some of the questions coming in on the chat, Connor. Max Carter says, taking Hall in the 5th round was a great value pick, as you mentioned. But does that value get affected by the 2 bad value picks in the 4th round that we've just talked about? Does that affect the fact that they got such great value in the 5th, or does it still look great to you?
Again, man, I mean, I don't think it was bad value. I don't think James Morgan was a bad value pick. I don't think Ashton Davis was a bad value pick when they were selected. I mean, it wasn't like the Jets reached for a guy that was supposed to go in the 7th round and they took him in the 4th. I mean, they love James Morgan. When we got on that Zoom call with him, by the way, and you talked to James Morgan for like 3.5 minutes, you can see instantly why the Jets love this kid. I mean, I've never seen, aside from the Florida Atlantic highlights that I YouTubed right after the pick, I've never seen the guy play football, but you can tell he's all there mentally. I mean, you can tell that the kid is put together. He has good size, and he's just you can tell he's what you want in a backup quarterback. I mean, they said, like, the Jets talked to him. They're like, look, if we draft you, we've got Sam Darnold. And what Morgan said wasn't, well, my goal is to be the mother effing starting quarterback, and Sam Darnold Schmarnold, I'm coming in for the gig. I'm coming in for it. No, what he said is, he told the Jets, he goes, look, whatever you want my job to do, I'm going to do that job better than anyone else. If you want me to start football games, I'm going to start football games. If you want me to prepare Sam Darnold, I'm going to prepare Sam Darnold. That's going to be my job. Couple that with the athleticism and the developmental potential of him, I think he's a good pick in the 4th round. Drafting a quarterback in the 4th round to develop as your long-term backup or somebody that you can then flip for a higher draft pick is a smart battle tactic. Teams have done it a ton. The Patriots did it with Jacoby Brissett. The Patriots did it with Jimmy Garoppolo, although they did draft Garoppolo to replace Tom Brady. And then the ownership stepped in and said, no, we want Tom Brady. I mean, look, the point is that it's happened before and it's happened successfully before. So I get the pick there. And again, with Ashton Davis, again, a good player that was going to be drafted around this range, can certainly have a role on defense and will. My thing is that the Jets didn't reach for these players. They weren't bad value picks. It's just, would they have been better off going with, in the 3rd round, Lloyd Cushenberry, the center guard from LSU? Would he have been a better pick? Would another offensive lineman have been a better pick? Would a second receiver been a better option? I don't know. I'm not a general manager. Joe Douglas is, and the Jets are paying him all this money and gave him this massive contract to make these decisions. So I think it's kind of pointless just to rip on someone. You can question him. Look, I question him. Like I said, I'm very intrigued to see Ashton Davis on the field. I personally wouldn't have drafted him just because I would have gone with another position there. We'll see how it all develops going forward. But no, I don't think that the draft in Bryce Hall is hurt because they reached on 2 guys before, because I don't think they reached on 2 guys before. I just probably would have drafted someone else. And with the Morgan pick, I would have drafted him. I have no problem with them drafting him. I just would have signed a veteran in free agency as well.
This goes back to something we talked about a little bit on Friday, and basically Matthew Jacobson wants us to project the starting O-line. One thing has changed since we talked about it on Friday. That is the 4th round when the Jets took Cameron Clark out of Charlotte, another offensive tackle. So it's another player into the mix. But just break it down for us, Connor, how you see that starting 5 lining up once the season starts, hopefully on time later this year.
Yeah, sure, man. Because if it's not, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. I'm already going crazy. I'm on like 2027 of my road to the show MLB player, right? Connor Hughes, the 3rd baseman, or Connor Hughes, the 3rd baseman converting to 2nd baseman for the Mets, is tearing it up at like 3:30 right now. I'm going for my first MVP as I play this one every single damn day. No, I think the line's gonna shape out with Becton at left tackle, Alex Lewis at left guard. I think that's going to look. Joe Douglas wouldn't say that Becton's going to start week 1. Newsflash: Becton's going to start week 1. But I think Alex Lewis is a guy that the Jets like a lot. I would be surprised if he was not one of the starting guards, barring injury. That's something that he's dealt with throughout his career. I think those are your 2: left tackle, left guard. Center, I think, is going to be Connor McGovern. Obviously, the Jets are paying him. He's the only person that they signed this offseason with a signing, not drafting, but signing, that is guaranteed to be on the roster in 2021. So he's obviously going to be this team's starting center. Right guard's where it's going to be up in the air a little bit. I think Greg Van Roten's probably going to beat out Bryan Winters, because I just don't think Bryan Winters gives the Jets much more than a mauler, and Greg Van Roten's a little bit more versatile. So I think that's going to be the pick. And then you'll have George Font over at right tackle. So it'll be Becton left tackle, Lewis left guard, McGovern center, Greg Van Roten right guard, and George Font right tackle. And, when the Jets signed Font in free agency, everyone was losing their damn minds over the 3 years, $30 million. Look, it's a 1-year contract. Period. That's what it is. It's a 1 year, 9.25. I think it's 1 year, $9.25 million contract. That is all that deal is, right? And everyone's like, oh, how's he going to start at left tackle? No, this was the plan all along. I talked to somebody that was very heavily involved in scouting and eventually signing George Font, right? And what he said is that this is a guy that has a ton of talent. What hurt him in Seattle is that he was a developmental project that was never allowed to develop, because as soon as he was put in there as their starting offensive tackle, he gets hurt, misses an entire season. When he comes back, his starting job is gone. So now all of a sudden he's playing right tackle, he's playing swing tight end, he's playing swing this, he's everywhere. So he never had a chance to say, okay, I am this position here. I'm going to play this position. I'm going to put all of my focus into this position, and I'm going to develop, right? Never had that luxury in Seattle because he constantly had to move around. I was told that he is going to take a significant step forward this year because he will finally have one position to work on. I was also told that he is a significantly better right tackle than he is a left tackle. by adding Becton, the Jets now have the luxury of swinging Font out there to right tackle. Now, if they had no one there if there was no one there in the draft, all 4 tackles had gone, they weren't able to trade for Trent Williams, all this stuff, then yeah, Font is probably going to be your left tackle, and then you'll have Chuma Adaga at right tackle. Instead, you now have Chuma Adaga and Font battling it out there for that right tackle spot. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's how I think the offensive line is going to play out, and it's a significant improvement from last year.
Well, and you mentioned Winters getting beat out as far as the starting job, but when you think about the roster as a whole, a couple of questions in the chat about, does Winters still have a spot on this roster after the addition of Cameron Clark, or could he be cut?
No, I think, yeah, why the hell not? I mean, you need linemen, right? I mean, look how many linemen did the Jets go through last year? At one point, they had like Brent Quale back on the field. Brent Quale like literally blew up his leg in training camp, and the Jets kept him on they're like, yeah, we're going to actually just have a chance. We might need you. They sure as hell needed him at the end of the year. And then all of a sudden, Connor McDermott was playing, and who were the other guys? They were at points, the Jets were trotting out offensive linemen that shouldn't even been employed by an NFL team, and they're starting for them. So no, I don't think Winters is in danger of being cut, just because why not keep him, right? I mean, you have the cap space to keep him. You saw what injuries did to this offensive line last year. And while he's probably not going to be super happy to be a backup, and you're going to be paying him a pretty decent amount of change to be a backup, who the hell cares? Keep him, man. I mean, look, if something happens to Alex Lewis, who's going to play left guard, you can now, if you keep Winters, you can now take Greg Van Roten, slide him over there to left guard, where again, Alex Lewis has had legitimate injury concerns and legitimate durability concerns throughout his career. So now you can take Bryan Winters, slide him over or you can take Greg Van Roten, slide him over to left guard, and now Bryan Winters is elevated to your right guard spot. So no, I don't think there's any danger. Maybe the Jets could try to flip him for a draft pick if he has a good training camp, but I don't think so. I think that the best bet for the Jets is to keep Winters, keep every one of these linemen, and keep Clark. I mean, there's some guys that lower level in the draft. I mean, you can go on the Jets roster. I can try to bring it up as we're speaking, but you can go down on the Jets roster and you can look at the players that they have on the offensive line. There are plenty of guys that can be cut and still keep 9 or 10 before you actually get to the point where you're cutting Bryan Winters. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of guys there. I'm bringing up the thing now.
Well, isn't there too, they get an extra spot for a lineman this year with the new.
Yeah, correct. And again, these are some of the names that we're talking about. Ben Braden, right? You're talking about Corbin Kaufusi. You're talking about Connor McDermott, James Murray. I mean, there's other guys on this roster where you have your starting 5, and then you'll probably keep as your backups Bryan Winters, Chuma, Josh Andrews, Jonathan Harrison, and Clark. There's your backups. That's probably 10 linemen. But I mean, look, the Jets went through 30 linemen last year. Why the hell not? Bring them all in. You're fine.
The depth is something this franchise is severely lacking in. So any position where you can actually have some is certainly nice. All right. One more question here. Taslim Hossein says, are the Jets going to be active on the undrafted free agent front?
Yeah. I mean, they've already started.
Or free agents after the 4 p.m. deadline today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think they'll be very active. Yeah, veteran. I think they'll be active. I think they'll go back and start dabbling in that market again. I think the guy, Logan Ryan, someone to watch. I think they could potentially look to add another receiver. I think they could look to add a veteran quarterback. I think they could look to add some linemen. Jadeveon Clowney's still out there. I don't think he's the perfect Joe Douglas guy, but at this point, I mean, how much money does Jadeveon Clowney actually expect to get, right? I mean, so he could be an option to be out there to add another pass rusher. Marcus Golden, I don't think is too much of an option just because he's a very similar player to Jordan Jenkins, but at the right price, sure, why the hell not? Bring him in. I mean, right now, Terrell Basham is the starting outside linebacker opposite Jordan Jenkins. You're probably going to look for someone. So, yeah, I would expect in the free agent market for the Jets now to get very heavily involved. And again, Joe Douglas implied that. He said, we're going to get through the draft. We're going to get through undrafted free agency. You've already seen the Jets sign some impressive guys. And then we're going to look back into that veteran free agent market and see what we can't do.
All right. So now it's, these virtual OTAs, the virtual everything. What are you going to be doing here, Connor, to keep yourself busy over the next couple of months? Because you can't play video games forever.
Challenge accepted, Tim. Let me tell you, challenge accepted. I'm going to be playing a ton of MLB The Show. I got this game called the Golf Club 2K19, so I've been playing that, going to the links, trying to improve my golf game a little bit. Don't think it's working at all, but I've been playing that, so it's going to be a bit of that, man. It's going to be the cool thing that this draft did is it gave us us as reporters. It gave us 9 new players plus Quincy Wilson as a 10th to look into their backgrounds. And it gave us a chance to look into their stories. And every single person in the world has a story to tell. And these guys certainly are no exception to that rule. So the next couple of days, that's probably what I'm going to be doing, is starting to do a deep dive into these guys, see if there's a story there worth telling, and making a run at that. I know that Ashton Davis actually has a pretty crazy background, which I've already started to make the steps to move towards writing that story. I think James Morgan has some stories worth told. And then once the Jets sign some of these undrafted free agents officially, we'll be diving into that as well. So it'll be a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of video gaming, and it's going to be a lot of it's going to be a lot of that, like starting to look into these players and starting to tell those big picture stories, right? Because there's no more projections. There's no more, the Jets can sign 10 this, 10 that, 10 this, 10 that. It's going to be like, all right, now we've got some new stories to tell. Let's go about telling those stories. And that's the best part about this job, is being able to tell the stories like this about these kids that haven't been told, get you guys a chance to know them aside from the football player. And that's what these next couple of weeks will be focused on.
Yeah, you could check out all those stories on The Athletic in the next few weeks, and you could save 40% off a subscription to get to those articles. Go to theathletic.com/the Can't Wait podcast to save. And if you want more coverage on the draft, prospects to pros, another great podcast here in the Athletic Podcast Network. Dane Brugler will be breaking down the entire draft with their final 2020 draft episode coming out today. And then the full shift to 2021. He actually already has a mock draft out on the Athletic today for 2021. So tank for Trevor is officially underway across the NFL. Thanks for tuning into this edition. Thanks for participating, getting your questions in on the chat. We'll be back with you before too long with more information on the Jets. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor_J_Hughes. Thanks to Marissa for the great job producing, and we'll talk to you again soon.